that you have. So now let's talk about the names of the rashis, right? So Parashara, he gives the names of the rashis, and I would also here give the Sanskrit names actually as they're given in the Brihad Parashara Shastra, because that will give us an even better understanding of the rashis. So Mesha is Aries, or the ram. Vrisha is Taurus, or the bull. Mithuna is Gemini, or the pear. Karka is Cancer, or the crab. Simha is Leo, or the lion. Kumarika is Virgo, or the girl. Tula is Libra, or the balance scale. Ali is Scorpio, or the scorpion. Dhanu is Sagittarius, or the bow. Nakra is Capricorn, or the crocodile. Kumbha is Aquarius, or the pitcher. And Meena is Pisces, or the fish. So, interestingly enough, all 12 rashis are actually symbolized by living earthly creatures, right? Of course, we might think that, hey, wait a minute, what about Libra? Libra is a balance scale, or Sagittarius is the bow, Aquarius is the pitcher, right? They sound like, just some items. But actually later on, in the Brihad Parashara Shastra, it actually describes those rashis as living creatures, right? In fact, it tells us that they are all human beings, right? Libra is considered to be a person with a balance scale. Aquarius is a person with a pitcher. And the reason why it is actually like this is because Parashara tells us that Libra and Aquarius are two-footed or human rashis. And that's why we know that these are not just items, like a balance scale or, a pitcher. But, these are actually people that we could say hold those items, okay? And then about Sagittarius, Parashara tells us later on that the first half of Sagittarius is two-footed or human, and the second half of Sagittarius is four-footed, right? Which is, of course, a four-footed animal, which is the horse here, right? And so Sagittarius is not just a bow, it's actually a human with a bow on the horse, okay? And so the human on the horse with the bow is ruled by the first half of Sagittarius, and the horse is ruled by the second half of Sagittarius. The two rashis, Sagittarius and Capricorn, they have been mystified, right? Sagittarius is thought to be a centaur, right? And this is obviously due to Greek influence, right? A centaur is a creature from Greek mythology with the upper body of a human and the lower body and also the legs of a horse. And but Sagittarius is not a centaur, right? It's a centaur actually also in one of the newer Vedic astrology books, such as the Brihad Jataka. There you find that it's also said that Sagittarius is a centaur, but it is not. Sagittarius is simply a man on a horse with a bow, okay? It's a human being that is complete, and it's a horse that is complete. And the first half of the sign rules that human being, and the second half of the sign rules that horse, right? And this is what Parashara tells us. But somehow or another, in some of the newer Vedic astrology books, actually they sort of also have adopted this idea of the Greeks that Sagittarius is also a centaur. But in Indian mythology, there's no centaur type creature, right? Or at least there's none that would be really, so important as to really allocate a sign in the zodiac, right? Greeks, they have those centaur mythologies, Centurions, of course, were Romans as well, who, rode on horses. The cavalry also were centurions as well. But in Vedic astrology, the concept of centaur really has no place. And so we simply understand that, Sagittarius is simply, it's a man on a horse with a bow, right? And so, yeah, we want to really throw out that concept of Sagittarius being a centaur, and we simply consider it, as this, person on a horse with a bow. Now, what about Capricorn? Is Capricorn this other, mythological creature with the front part of a deer and the hind part of a crocodile? That's what the Brihad Jataka also wants to tell us. No. In the Brihad Parashara Shastra, we do not find this description, right? This mythologically weird creature doesn't exist there, right? Parashara simply tells us that Capricorn is a nakra or a crocodile. And in lots of texts and lots of other Vedic astrology texts, actually we find Capricorn is called Makara. Makara also refers to a mythological creature, right? It is actually sort of an ancient sea monster, identified as a crocodile, sometimes also as a shark or as a dolphin even. And I think it's probably originally just a crocodile, because there is actually crocodiles that can actually go into the ocean, and they are 23 feet long, right? So those ocean-going crocodiles, they can go thousands of miles out into the ocean, and they can live in the ocean. And, they are salt water dwelling crocodiles, right? They are, amongst the largest, or maybe even the largest crocodile species on Earth, right? And 23 feet is long. This is a really huge crocodile, and that's like 4 times, the length of an average man. So that's like a big monster, right? And and so Makara, therefore, it's very likely that that was, what they referred to, this ancient sea monster, was really just a crocodile and not this sort of unearthly, creature. And we are therefore going to take the meaning of Parashara, of a nakra, or crocodile, as it actually fits the sign of Capricorn perfectly. To know the names of the rashis as they're given by Parashara is really important, because simply if you know those names, you will get so much useful information about the rashis. So Parashara tells us that Aries is called Mesha, which means the ram. Taurus is Vrisha, or the bull. Gemini is called Mithuna, or the pear, right? So Mithuna doesn't just mean twins. Mithuna refers to a pair of humans, right? It can also mean twins, but the original definition of Mithuna is actually much broader, right? It really refers to a pair of humans, and that actually specifically has to do with a couple, right? The Brihad Jataka tells us that Gemini is symbolized by a man with a club and a woman with a lute in close embrace. So Gemini really refers to a human pair, okay? Then Cancer is called Karka, which is the crab. Leo is called Simha, which is a lion. Virgo is called Kumarika, which is simply a girl, right? It is not a virgin. Kumarika refers to a young girl who is too young for puberty. And so, so naturally she is a virgin because she hasn't reached puberty yet. So, how can she not be a virgin? But Virgo simply refers to a young girl who is a prepubescent girl, who is naturally a virgin, right? And that, of course, is quite different than a woman who might be 30 years old, who obviously had puberty, but who somehow or other hasn't had sex yet, and therefore she is still virgin, right? Those are obviously two completely different things. And to consider Virgo as a virgin is, again, because of their Greek influence. In Vedic astrology, Virgo is the Kumarika, or it is simply a girl, right? And yeah, we will explain actually the symbolism later about, in depth, about all these, about all the signs, and then you will understand how Virgo is actually a girl and not just sort of a, like maybe some old virgin, okay? Now, Libra is called Tula, or a balance scale. Scorpio is actually called Ali by Prashar, which refers to the scorpion. Now, usually, most other astrology texts actually call Scorpio Vrishika, which is another name for Scorpio, or another name for the scorpion, sorry. Then Sagittarius is called Dhanu, which is the bow. Capricorn is called Nakra, or the crocodile, and I'm really glad actually that Prashar here uses Nakra, because I think that crocodile is really the best animal to symbolize Capricorn. Aquarius is called Kumbha, or pitcher, and Pisces is called Mina, or fish.